Hey everybody, John Van Barriger here with The Outdoor Kind, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this free after hours segment of Real World Safety. Now, before we get into that, I want to tell you about a project we're working on that I think you'll be really interested in. It's just going to be a few seconds here and we'll get on with the show. So we are currently in pre-production to have a new podcast come out the first week of May. It is going to be on the great outdoors, on outdoors industry news. We'll have interviews with some amazing people. And every week we'll also have some safety tips that will help make your time outdoors a lot more fun. We're also going to highlight the work of first responders in our communities, in the outdoor community, and all of the great things that they do for us. They do not get enough credit. So keep an eye on the website listed below and on our social media. It is theoutdoorkind.org/blog. And that will give you more information as it becomes available. So thanks for all of your support in the past. And as they say, on with the show. Cheers, everybody. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the, I guess you'd say, after hours section of Real World Safety. We started out over at Canoecopia doing a presentation over there. And we had a lot of stuff we just didn't get to. And so given how important safety is when you're out paddling and camping, we wanted to continue the conversation here for a little bit. So that's what we're going to do. We suggest if you come across this on the internet without seeing Canoecopia, suggest you get a ticket, run over there and see the start of it. You'll learn about who these great panelists are. You'll learn a little bit more about them. You get a chance to see a lot of presentations for one low price. And then you can come back here and check this out too. So Kevin, Krista, Scott, what do you think? Shall we go?
We're really doing this because Krista could not keep quiet. She was going on and on and on. And we're
the swearing, right? The swearing too.
And I got nothing. We couldn't say a darn word. Nothing.
Oh. We need more Kevin. More Kevin and more cowbell, right? Cowbell to 11.
Look at that.
Oh no.
Here's a first aid thing for you guys. Yeah. So you guys have all done this probably. Well, maybe just me because I'm an idiot. But so I was out with students for the last 4 days. And I'm the guide. Oh, look, listen, Kevin, you know what he's doing. And I walked away from the campsite and I tripped on ice. And I put my hand out. Oh, I can't lift my arm up any higher than this, right? And it all came out. You okay? I'm good. I'm good. Have you ever done that? Which is wrong, right? You should. I mean, you guys are professionals. You used to say, "No, I think I've hurt. I think I broke my arm."
Yeah.
But so what do you do when you get someone out there? And I shouldn't say it, but sorry, Scott and John, but it's usually males, right? I'm good. I'm good. It's an animal instinct. No, I'm not wounded at all. Do not get the pack around and try to kill me. We're not wolves. So do you know how to sense that when you go into the sort of first aid idea?
I actually talk about that a lot, especially winter camping. It's interesting you bring that up because some people are complainers and they like to complain. All right. And they have no problem telling you what's wrong. I think that's a fairly small segment of the population. Let's call it 10% or 20%. But a lot of people don't want to be a problem and they don't want to be a pest, especially if this is a new thing and maybe they're worried about the challenge or if they're up to it. They don't want to slow down the group. They don't want to look like they're being the problem. They don't want to admit they're getting a blister or there's a sore spot on their heel. They don't want to admit that their fingertips are getting cold, those types of things. And so what I try and do when I try and teach people is not just how you doing. John will say, "Oh, I'm okay." Ask very specific questions. And so like in winter game, how are your toes? Oh, they're fine. Are they tingly at all? And even repeat the question. Give them another chance to bring it out. And that's what I found. I try and get very specific and ask those, not just let them off with an okay. How are your fingers? Is your shirt dry? Things like that. How much, with the Boy Scouts, we're asking the kids, have you drank any water recently? Yeah. Well, we give them water bottles that hang on their neck and then sleeve they open up their pocket for a couple of reasons. It keeps the water from freezing and it's handy access, but then we can also see it really clearly. Like, oh, their water bottle's still full. They haven't drank anything. So,
yeah. So if you would have fallen in front of me, Kevin, I unfortunately it's very hard for me now, especially after I've gone through training, to not ask those specific questions. And I think when people ask those specific questions, it's not that they're being nosy. If I asked, when you take a deep breath, your ribs hurt. Did you hit your head when you fell? Can you move your fingers? How high up can you move your arm? That is going to give you a really good idea. Were you dizzy before you fell? I mean, there's so much that you can learn from people in just 5 or 6 questions. So, if they're asking the right questions like that, you should probably answer them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very specific.
That's a good answer. Like, because I just crawled away.
Well, you were the big kahuna. They're not going to challenge you, Kevin.
Right.
Well, that's a really good point, because really maybe that was in my mental state at the time. Like, I'm the leader. I can't show that I'm injured. But that was so stupid of me not to say, oh, I think I broke my arm. Please take care of me.
Right.
Yeah. How about one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about in the initial session here? What about taking children out, for a long weekend for the first trip into the backcountry? You all have children. What kind of things should you prepare for, look for, or think about when you're taking your kids out for the first time in this kind of environment?
Krista?
I'll jump in at once now.
I can start. Honestly, in my neck of the woods, which is northern Wisconsin, we have an abundance of deer ticks and Lyme's disease. So the big 3 for me would be making sure that the kids have sunblock, they are well hydrated, and they have some sort of tick protection on them. We've dealt with Lyme's disease a few times and it's ugly. So just off the cuff, that's what I would definitely be starting out with anyway.
Okay. I'd like to come back to Lyme's too and ticks too in a minute,
Sure.
But Kevin, Scott, how about issues with kids? Let me rephrase that. I mean, not issues with kids.
Lots.
Think about
Lots of. So I have a 5-year-old little boy, and he's my little adventure buddy for my personal outdoors time. So we get out and do little adventures almost every weekend, try and get out for a little bit. And so I'm trying to foster that and encourage that. But I also have this great fear of, I don't want to overdo it and have him, push away from it because Dad drugged me out all the time and it was a miserable experience or something. So I want to make it fun. I want to keep it exciting. I try and stay aware of, like my energy level and interest in it might be much greater than his. So smaller doses. And, I see folks online who are talking about doing stuff with their kids that it's fantastic, like these really great adventures, but it's just far beyond my personal level of comfort level with risk. So you mentioned earlier, like big plan, little plan, what's plan A, what's my plan B, what are my bailouts, what happens if something goes wrong? And so, I kind of wrestled a little bit, like, because, man, I like doing this wilderness survival stuff. I sleep in the snow at 40 below. I like to run rapids, blah, 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 all the stuff I like to do. But I keep it pretty fun country, pretty close to home, especially because it's often just me and him. And I worry as much, what if something happens to me, as a middle-aged guy? What if I slip on the ice, or what if I have a heart attack? What's he going to do? So we've talked about it. He's 5, but we kind of go through it, and I don't want to scare him. But we talk about, you find a tree and go in Dad's backpack and get out the poncho and put that on. And he has a whistle in his pocket all the time. And we talk about sitting there and having a snack and blowing his whistle and things like that. And trying to teach him how to use my phone to call for help. And so I just, honestly, I keep it much safer, much more local. And I'm trying to also keep it really fun and dribble small doses on. And hopefully that gives me an adventure partner for life as he gets to be older and push away.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I met your son, Scott. Amazing.
Oh, that's right.
amazing kid, like hyper than I am, like Lord, and that's hard to beat. And yeah, my daughter's 16 now, and she's traveled with me since she was since 6 months old was her first trip, right? So, yeah, have a bailout plan for sure. Have an emergency device, like a spot device or in reach, whatever, so you can push it. Show someone else in the trip how to push it in case something happens to you. We forget that. We always are trying to protect everybody, but we forget about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's number one. Make sure someone else in the group knows where that device is. And also, they don't really know where they are. So who cares if you go off in the far, far north?
Yes.
Like, you might want to do that trip. Yes. That kid doesn't care. As long as they have a s'more to cook over the fire and Barbies play, they're fine. But the other is that make sure they have a good time, because if they have a terrible time, they're never going to go back. The only time, a lot of people ask me this question, oh, you take your kid on all these far out trips where you're crazy, 12 days across Algonquin, whatever, if something happened. Well, I use emergency devices like a spot device, so everybody at home, like my mom, knows that we're okay. And that's a good feeling. They're more comfortable. I know I'm okay. We're having a good time, but I push that device saying I'm okay, and everybody at home is like, "Oh, thank goodness he hasn't killed his child yet. What is he doing? What is he thinking?" And the other is that the only time ever my child ever had a problem out there was a gummy bear. She was, how old she was? Maybe 6, maybe 4. I'm not sure, but she was choking on a gummy bear. So I put her upside down and shook her, and it came out. And my mom went ape crap on me when I got back, and she goes, "Well, she could have died." I went, "That could have happened in the kitchen."
Yeah.
Yeah. So what am I going to do? I'm going to stay at home the rest of my life and not take her in the wilderness because she might choke on a gummy bear.
Yeah.
So,
right.
You remind me of something, Kevin. Sometimes, so 2 things. I love what you said about a younger child doesn't necessarily know where they are. So with my little boy, we go an hour north of here, and guess what? Not even, we're on a beautiful lake with pine trees and big boulders, and we're catching fish, and there's no one on the lake, and it's a beautiful lake. And we can enjoy that. He doesn't know the difference between that and the Boundary Waters and Quetico or Wabakimi. He doesn't know. I know, but I'm having a great time because he's having a great time. But I'll hear, kind of related to your, could it happen in the kitchen? People say, natives have been raising their kids in the wild since millennia, and this is how we do it. That's true. But if you read the stories of the old timers, they traveled at a different pace and a different style. And they weren't on a time constraint where they had to be at work Monday morning. And these time constraints often get us into trouble in the outdoors. They make us push across a big windy lake or race to make a certain amount of mileage. And you'll hear about, I love reading Calvin Rutstrom, the old Minnesotan. He'll talk about coming across native camps where it's raining, so they just kind of set up camp and hang out for a few days. They're moving at a different pace typically, and maybe a much smarter, wiser one where they're not pushing themselves when they have kids. So,
yeah,
those are really good points. Really good points. And curious about one thing too, and this is the DeLorme InReach before Garmin brought them. I tripped before I had this. I've tripped since I've had this. What do the rest of you think about the abilities of something like this? Because let's be honest, it's a fair piece of change to get something like this, right? $400 or $500 range, depending on the model you get. And they have for those who are looking at them or considering them or don't know anything about them, they have an SOS function on it. You can see down here. That is the reason I bought this, is because if something really bad goes wrong, I mean, I want to say the element of pride, right? I don't ever want to have to call a first responder into the wilderness. And I don't want to put anybody at risk to, particularly if I've done something, or if I've done something stupid, right? There's that element of, I'll get myself back out. But I also, that pride isn't going to overwhelm me to the point I won't hit that SOS button if I need to, right? But I have the option with this now to do this. You buy the device, you get a subscription plan with it. It can be from I think it's $15 a month for kind of a maintenance plan, up to $70 to $100 for the Explorer or Expedition plan. And what do you think? Worth it? Worth the cost?
Krista, you should answer it because, again, you have the best backdrop. I mean, it's mesmerized me right now at this point. I'm like, oh.
Stop. I will certainly answer. And I'm obviously going to say yes. I think it's a great idea. I can't imagine going out without one, honestly. So I can't imagine being in a situation where you're like, I am stuck. What do I do? At least you have, that's part of your plan. It's great.
Scott, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. It's cheap life insurance. I think, if it's just yourself, no one's relying on you, maybe make a different decision. But especially if you're a group leader and you're responsible for other people, and maybe even though you don't fully know their physical situation or backgrounds, it's worth having. I've got the same one you held up. What I haven't done is I haven't used the back and forth texting or the GPS updates, linking with social media. For me, it's just sat in the barrel as an emergency device. But the thought, from years of practicing, signal mirrors and smoke signals with fires and color contrast and all these things, wilderness survival techniques, good to know. But man, to be able to push that button if you're really in trouble and actually initiate that chain of response like that is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm older than Scott and Krista. And you might have heard this before, but I've got some older friends that will say, well, back in the day, we never needed this. And I will always look at them square in the face and said, I wish I had that back in the day. Are you a fool? But the only negative, and I get this, is that when you have technology out there, we get less sedation. So Quetico, a couple of years ago, the superintendent said, wow, that was just a mess up. And what happened? Well, we got to call in someone to push their spot device. We went to rescue them, but we're on the way to rescue someone else, but they were closer. And we rescued them and found out their partner, the canoe partner, happened to be a dog that had diarrhea. And that's the negative. It's like people are now sort of, I'm in trouble. Push, push, push. Well, they're not really in trouble. Right?
Yeah.
That's sort of a yin and yang, or I'm not sure how to put it. But the other thing too is like I always bring a sat phone, and I'll go to the group and I say, okay, this is only for emergency services, and they don't. They call home every night. So what I do on my trips is I'll give it to someone else. I say, okay, you and I know where it is. Nobody else knows where it is. Mm-hmm. And that's a rule. So it's just called, we deal with technology, how it progresses, which is really good. It's not negative, but we have to deal with ethics of that technology.
Yeah, I think that's huge. It's I love doing wilderness trips because I always have, because I just do. It's beautiful, the physical experience, all that type of thing. I think it's more important than ever to give people that digital diet, that break. I'll tell people before they go on a trip, when's the last time you've gone 3 days or 5 days without checking your email? And most of them say, I haven't gone 12 hours, So to provide that is time slows down. It's a different pace of life. It's wonderful. So that's the plus. And I don't think you necessarily want just that call home all the time or constant texting, but for emergency purposes, it's pretty important.
I was with these college guys though a couple years ago, and it was the whole football, baseball. It was the Blue Jays. They're about to play, and we were on a 7-day trip, and we're on day 5, and they begged me, Kevin, can we have the sat phone to find out if they won or not? No, it's only for emergency. We cannot use it we cannot do that. And they were like literally begging me. I said, okay, you got 2 minutes. Find someone to call. That's all you got. So they chose who to call. The one guy called his mom, and the mom goes, I'm not watching the game right now. I felt so bad for them. Oh, my God.
I have used the one of the things I like about it outside of the SOS feature is that it's great for people back home, right? To know that you're okay as you're going along on the trip. And I've used, for example, when we did the Yukon Journey thing, we had people, we put it up so people could track where we were. There's a couple of things with them too that are kind of funny though, because we had one day where we got to we found an island that we wanted to camp on. So we went out on I guess it would have been the western side of the island, got up in and kind of made the slog up to, climbed up a really nasty bank, get in, and then walking around looking at it. It's like, yeah, we could make this work. This would be a good place to stay. And then I started hearing voices. Not the ones in my head like now, but the voices out through the woods, and went over and turned out it was these two guys who had met on the river a couple days ago. And they're like, oh yeah, well come inside and join us, but go around the other side of the island and come in that way. It's a whole lot easier. So, okay. So I go back out, we get back in the kayaks, we go back up around the head of the island, come back down the other side, get out and start unloading the boats. Well, I had forgotten to turn off the tracker. And so on the map that people could go and see what was going on, and my wife back home, they see this thing go up and around, and it's like doing this in the middle of the river. And there was, it was just the map. It wasn't a satellite thing. So it looks like there's just all this crazy line
in the river
going on there. And it was just the fact that I'd forgotten to turn it off. So she's like, what is going on? She was like, whirlpool? What is, what's happening out there? And so there's things with that, or if you have a day where you get up, if someone has issues, or you just get a late start, right? You have some coffee in the morning and then you don't get going on your normal sort of time. People back home can also look at that and go, oh, is there a problem, right? They didn't get on the water till noon today. What's going on? So
that's the old fashioned though, is you still keep to the old fashioned. You still tell someone at home where you're going.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When you're going to come back, and when you come back, you tell them, because there was a solo tripper that went when this whole thing started. In fact, the year when actually Spot came out with their new device years ago, Toronto Star, newspaper here in Canada, did a big story, and they tracked the guy, and oh, it's great. This is where he's going every day. It's fantastic. And then all of a sudden, for 2 days, there was no tracking, and they called me, and they're like, what do we do? Do we call the search and rescue? And the search and rescue called me, and I said, and you guys would laugh because, like, Scott, I'm somewhat know what I'm doing, but I'm not the expert. Like, nobody should be calling me, right? So, and I said, well, maybe the batteries are done on the device, because he's not calling you, save me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. He didn't bring extra batteries for his device.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Yeah. And I've only heard one story. I was sharing this with Krista when we were talking before too. One story, I don't know. I hold this up, but I don't know what device it was. There's a number of these that are made, right? And this was a few years ago. And he and his friends were river tripping up north. They got to a rock bar. They set up camp for the night. They everything's set. They're sitting around a campfire enjoying it and just laughing and having a good time. And all of a sudden they see a rescue helicopter come over the trees and stuff. And they're like, oh, somebody's in trouble, And then the rescue helicopter came around and touched down on the rock bar that they were on, because there had been a false positive, if you will, that the device had sent out the SOS, it had triggered the SOS. Yeah. And with that particular device that he was using, there wasn't the callback feature on, for example. And again, early technology, early versions of this. But they search and rescue guys were like, what's the emergency? And there was none. So that's the only one I've ever heard of like that, though, too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm forgetting the details. I'll get it wrong, but I want to say it was a few years ago, Grand Canyon, maybe, some hikers activated the thing at least twice, if not 3 times. And they were, similar to the dog has diarrhea type incident. And it caused a real big uproar about, who should pay for the rescues and, problems with that. But,
Yeah, well, Krista, what do you think of that? Because that's going on in Canada. I think in the U.S. you're way ahead of us with that. But now the parks are really thinking about that. If you push it and you don't need it, you should be paying that helicopter fee. What do you think about that?
Well, that's interesting because John and I were talking about this because I said, what happens if somebody accidentally pushes a button? Because we have that happen all the time. There are people with life alert bracelets or necklaces that bump them, and they get a call back from dispatch saying, or the company, and nobody answers. So they dispatch the first responders and then the ambulance. It happens a lot. And at this time, they do not get charged if the ambulance is out. Everybody just says, oh, thank goodness you're fine. Not a big deal. I think that could be honestly really tricky and have a really bad result if people start getting charged every time they accidentally push a button. But in the case of, a dog having stomach distress, I think that there really should be a line drawn.
Yeah. It was actually $35,000 fee. Yeah. One just outside of my house 2 years ago, the OPP, the police said, do not go on the ice, telling the ice fishing guys, do not go on the ice right now. It's not safe. There's heavy fog. Some guy went out. He got in distress. He called in. They saved him, and $15,000 fine. And he fought it, and he actually won in court. It was
really? Wow.
Yeah. And I remember being in the media with him. I was actually on TV talking after he was on, and he was in the green room with me. And he's like, the government, that's their job. I pay taxes for them to save me. I went, they told you not to go on the ice that day.
Mm-hmm.
And do you not hear that? Well, yeah, I heard them, but I know more than they do. Well, you don't, man, because they saved you for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Right.
Unbelievable.
I know out in, like New Hampshire, you buy the card essentially. So if you're climbing some of the mountains out there and you have an issue, it's part of the thing of, are you prepared? And it's like God, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's like a hiker's registration or, insurance card, if you will, to help raise funds for search and rescues. Oh. And if you don't have that, and if you don't appear prepared, so let's say you're an Instagram star and you want to go, up Mount Washington in winter, a really bad idea, and should only be done by somebody who's skilled, right, and prepared and has everything together. They will hit you with a fine, or suppose they can hit you with up to the entire cost of the operation. My understanding is, but a lot of it comes down to too is what is the person like when the search and rescue group gets out there, right?
But the other side of the coin, though, John, and I love doing the other side of the coin because we're not all right with what we say. It's like there are people that do know what they're talking about, but they don't have a certificate saying they do, right? And that aggravates them. So during the pandemic, I don't know, but you must have to deal with this all the time. If I have to go into one more place and they read me the 3 pages of, do you have these symptoms? Have you been in contact with? And we're all like, blah, blah, blah. Where nobody's listening. And then we listen, yes. And then we get in. We're allowed to go in. We don't want to get into that world where that happens in the outdoor industry. If we're only allowed to go into a park where we have to, watch a video on safety issues and agree with safety issues and take a course with safety issues, nobody's going to want to go paddling anymore.
Yeah, it takes the fun out of it. It can desensitize you to the real risk, right? So like your point, Kevin, if you're hearing that all the time, it might not alert you to, no, this trail or this river actually is risky. Pay attention.
I am sounding old when I'm doing that, but I think this is a good point. My God, I'm starting to sound like Cliff Jacobson.
But by the way, when you mentioned that Krista and Scott were younger than you, you forgot to put me in that category, man.
Yeah, you're old.
Fine, be that way. We're moving on then. Let's talk about water when we're out. What do you prefer to prepare water for safe drinking?
This is not my forte. I am here to learn on this subject for sure. So lay it on me, guys.
Put pressure on Krista and ask you, what do you know then about it?
What do I know? I know what John told me a few days ago when we were talking about this. I know that a lot of people think that when you get water to the point where it's kind of bubbling, but not boiling. People think it's safe and it's not. So that you should be boiling your water, right?
For at least a minute. Very good.
Okay. Thank you. I do pay attention every once in a while. And you might have mentioned something about tablets that people can use. And honestly, that is all I know.
Really good point, Krista, though. I do sound like an old person when I say this. Never say I don't know anything. You always say, I don't know this yet.
Okay. Right.
I always say that to my daughter. I don't know anything, Dad. You don't know anything yet. Right. Because you can't be as wise as Scott. Like, look at him. Like, the man is like, what? You're 8 feet tall, aren't you?
Not about, yeah.
No, seriously. I met you in person. I had a sore neck looking at you.
I think you were in a hole, Kevin. You were in kind of a depression. Yeah.
But John did say also that water that's clean enough to drink is water that's clean enough to clean out wounds also. So that I think is really important to bring up also. Well,
especially if you're taking care of me, I want you to know that. So yeah.
Right. We would be checking you for a head wound for sure.
Here, I'm going to use this really dirty water to clean your wounds. You'll be fine.
Right.
What about Kevin?
How did I do?
How do you prep, Kevin? What do you do to your water?
Oh, me? I assume all water is disgusting. So in Canada and in Northern Ontario, there's a few people still that will dip their water or dip their cup into the water and drink it. And they'll see me at a show. Oh, it's so pure up there. It's fantastic. No, it's not. Atmospheric pollutants will fall in the water. You'll have contaminants. And I had a job where I would go around campsites and take water samples and find out how much poo is in the water, because people are pooping on the island and then it's washing into the water and then people are drinking it. So I'm very phobic, absolutely phobic. And when you get stomach ailments from that in the water, it doesn't happen on trip unless you're going on for a 20-day trip. But if you're on a 5-day trip, it takes at least 10 days for those parasites. What's it called?
Giardia.
Giardia?
Giardia, but there's a long-term. It goes in your intestine, and then they hatch in your intestine. And I've had it twice. I also, the second time I went to the doctor to get tested, I forgot to put my name on my poo sample, and then the nurse came out and said, "Mr. Callan, you forgot to put your name on your poo sample." I was like, "Oh, thanks for telling everybody that I have Giardia." So, but it takes forever to get rid of. You don't want it, but it doesn't happen usually on the trip. If you feel nauseous, you have stomach cramps the third day, it's not Giardia. It's actually you're not drinking enough water. So that's not the issue. But right now, if I go in a large group, I'll use gravity filter, because it, especially when I go out with a lot of youth, they don't drink as much as you think they are. So if I do a gravity filter, it's like getting the cows to the trough, right? So if I give them all one of those pump filters, they won't do it because they're lazy. Oh yeah, I filtered water, Kevin. No, you didn't. So if I actually do it for them, it's all there for them. I never ever put my cup in the water anywhere in all of Northern Ontario, all the places I've traveled. I've never put my cup in the water and drank it. And people will say, "Oh, Kevin, you don't want to talk about." That's fine. Do whatever you want. I'm not judging you whatsoever. I don't judge people, but I'm not drinking water right out of the lake.
If you just put a little scotch in there, Kevin, doesn't that kind of...
Does it? You guys are experts on that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Does it the ratio right.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Really?
No. That was a joke, just for everyone who's listening.
Yeah. Send your letters to Scott.
No, that was a joke.
Seriously? I'm all excited, Scott. Gee.
Scott, what about you? What do you do to...
So the short answer is I've done many different things. I'm kind of in line with Kevin. I know I have many friends who, boundary waters quite a go. They say, I drink the water. Go out in the middle of the lake, drink the water. I don't want Giardia. I don't want the hassle when I get home. So I do treat my water. I definitely have the people I'm with treat me. So it kind of depends on the trip and where I'm at. There's red algae in the boundary waters. In the the old pumps, they're just a pain. I hate it. You're in camp, you're tired, you're going down the rocky shore, you're trying to throw that little float out there and you're hunching over, pumping that thing, and it's getting plugged up and mosquitoes are biting your backside and everything. It's terrible. The big gravity filter bags are what I bring for group trips now, where you just fill them up, you roll them up, you hang them on a tree, and you go about setting up camp, and they fill up. But I have everyone, I recommend they bring the little bottle of the purification tablets, because when you're on the move, it's nice to be able to fill up the water bottle, throw a tablet in. The taste doesn't bother me. Some people say they don't like the taste. I recommend bring some little packets of, like sugar-free Kool-Aid or lemonade or Crystal Light or something like that to mix in. But I don't mind it. Like John, our Ozarks trip, the river was crystal clear, nice cold spring-fed water. You might need a little more time for the tablet to dissolve because of the cold water, but I just tablets the whole time. That's what I recommend everyone else did, because it's such clear water. Other water, you've got more sediment. Now, I've done some trips where you boil only, if it's like a survival type course. And we actually did a Canoecopia trip a few years ago where we wanted to be a little bit more rustic. So we cooked everything on a campfire, boiled water. I think what people need to understand is that takes more time. It takes more time to boil the water, and then you don't want to drink that piping hot water, especially on a summer night. You got to let it cool off, and it's just some people don't like to take. The water tastes kind of smoky when you do that. One of the guys, remember at the end of the trip, is like, I just want some cold, clear, not smoky water. So I do like the gravity filter bag. I carry the tablets with me all the time. I carry a little metal cup with me for emergency situations, so I always have a way to boil water. I don't like the pumps. The UV pens are pretty handy. I've used that on 1 or 2 trips, but for whatever reason, I haven't fully got on board with the UV. Well, I guess maybe one other thing I'll just mention. Some of the trips I do are like long weekend, and they're more front country trips. And like John, I know you've paddled the lower Wisconsin River.
Yes.
Beautiful. It's one of my favorites. Probably a lot of the Canoecopia people are familiar with that. I love that trip. It's one of my favorites, real close to my heart. I bring water. I bring big water jugs. I don't even mess around trying to purify. That's a beautiful river, but it's the hardest working river in the nation. There's all the logging paper mills and stuff like that upstream, all the farm runoff and the chemicals and stuff. And same thing, I paddle a lot in the Mississippi. I'm just, emergency situation, I try and purify it, but I just bring big jugs of water for the crew on trips like that.
Yeah. I did the lower Wisconsin.
Why not?
No. I did the lower Wisconsin in fall. I went out and did a solo trip. This is probably, I don't know, 6-7 years ago now. And I wanted to try the pens, the Sterapens, just to see. And there were, every sandbar was covered in goose crap. It was bad, right? And so I had a little sand shovel that I would actually use to, not just to, for anything in camp, but to clean out an area to put your tent or whatever. Because it was just covered. It was on prime migration time.
Well,
and,
on busy weekends in the summer, sorry to interrupt you, John, but the sections of that river downstream from the rental shops have hundreds of people floating that river, camping on the sandbars. They're not all packing it out. So it's not just goose crap that's on those sandbars. There's a lot of human waste. So.
And in fact, most of them don't pack it out, right? And
no,
if you look at a lot of the canoe companies that do this, and the numbers are really going up down there, right? That's
a popular trip. Yeah.
A very popular trip. It's a great trip.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, well, I'll try the pen to see if it worked. And I thought it was kind of a good test just because of all the geese going through, right? And it was fine. I had no problem. I also thought it was kind of a good thing because I thought, well, you know what? If I do have an issue, I'll be home by the time, like Kevin was saying, with cardia, a certain period of time, then you're going to have problems. So, but yeah, I've used a number of different things too, from boiling to pills to gravity filters. I like a lot if I'm going to be in an area where I'm going to be there for several days or whatever. You can just hang it up on a tree, go over, fill a water bottle. You're great, So yeah, so I used all those different tools too. It just kind of depends on the time and place.
I haven't used it yet, but I heard good things about it. And actually, I forgot about this until just now. I got for Christmas one of these Grail filters where it's like a cup you scoop and then there's a plunger that you push. So the filter's built into the plunger and you push, then you can just drink right out of the cup. So
kind of like a French press for coffee. Or
that's right. It's kind of like a French press, yeah.
I use that this past year, and they're really good, except you if you're really thirsty, you don't want that because yeah, I got the one where you suck water into you, and if you're really thirsty, you're like,
not enough, huh?
Yeah. When I get water at the campsite, though, I assume that the people before me were just pigs. I'm not saying they are. I'm just assuming. So I never, ever get the water where it's easy to get water because they probably have done their dishes there. They washed their hands after pooping. So I always get water at the campsite where nobody else would think of getting water.
One thing, and that just kind of triggered for me too, and like I'll put together different first aid kits with different things. Just kind of when you said that, this is my backcountry ultralight first aid kit, and it's got a lot in it just because it's not just for me, right? In case I meet somebody else out there, somebody has a problem. One thing to kind of add to this now is during the age of pandemic, when you put together your first aid kit, when you're out where there might be other people, be sure to put in masks and be sure to put in some extra gloves too, right? And then hand sanitizer. Just have those things with you because it's a pandemic, right? It's something that we normally don't think about, but good things to add to a kit.
Or just go on a solo trip. How are you guys doing for a pandemic here? I'm wearing a hat because it's out of control. Scott, it's terrible. Oh my God, it's out of control. Yeah, Krista, you're looking fantastic.
Getting bushy.
But Scott, like my God, you got to go to see someone about that.
I know.
How about food? What do you do for food? In terms of, do you take extra? Do you pack extra? What do you do about that when you're going out for a trip?
Extra food, I do. So I do some backpacking trips. I love where I can get to backpacking, but canoe camping is my main thing. But I know in the backpacking circles, I'll see people say, they're conscious of every gram, every ounce. And I've seen several times, backpacking gurus say, oh, if you come home on an empty stomach the last day, no big deal. I don't subscribe to that philosophy, especially if it's a group trip. The food, sure, you can go 30 days without food. Most people are just fine. You're not going to die. But the food, as you mentioned earlier, John, it can impact your decision making. It impacts morale and so the psychology. It can help keep you warm. I know from winter camping, if you're not eating, you're not getting calories in, you start getting cold. And so on the canoe trips, there's always a surplus jar of peanut butter and packet of tortillas, one meal beyond in case we get a rain delay or a blowover. And my secret weapon I usually hide in there is a jar of Nutella because that makes everyone happy, is a real mood booster. And so it's cheap, easy calories that can, and so, I bring extra.
Kevin, anything to add on that one?
I've sold on trips. Toilet paper and Nutella. I've been on trips where like, hey, I got a thing of Nutella in my pack. Oh, how much do you want for it? And I'll throw in a roll of toilet paper. When I was guiding or taking those clients out the last few days, showing them how to guide. I mean, they were guides in the summer, but they wanted a winter guide. And they, at the end of the 3-day workshop, they said, what is the number one thing you need to tell us? Good food. Mm-hmm. And they're like, why? Because it's winter? Oh, yeah, because it's winter, you need it. But if you serve them lousy meals and they're paying you to take them in the woods, and a lot of them said, well, that's just wrong. Like, we'll just do the boil ups, like the bags of pre-whatever. I went, really? I'm going to pay you $1,000 so I can eat those bags of that you just put water in? Like, are you crazy? So I spent a lot of time with them showing them how to make really good meals. And most of them got it, but a lot of them were like, they're saying, like, I don't get this. Like, what's so important? I go, really? If you go to a restaurant and you get a bad meal, are you going to go back to that restaurant? So if you get a bad meal in the wilderness, you're going to say, well, I'm not going to go back there again. Like, that's wrong, right? So,
if you can keep people well-fed and reasonably dry at the end of the day, give them that little psychological break where they go to bed well-fed and dry and warm. They can face the next day with a smile and brave face, but it's that day after day if they're not well fed and they're getting cold and they're just kind of getting eaten alive by bugs. That's when they really start spiraling downwards in terms of their happiness.
But I figure if I go on a trip and I have Krista's background behind me at all times, if I have a shower curtain behind me and have that smile, I'm good.
Listen to me. I have a question for you. So what does a typical day look like as far as meals go for camping? I mean, what are you guys eating out there? What is very typical for people to do?
Kevin, John.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I am a foodie. I am a total foodie. So this is very important.
Facebook, your pandemic dinners that you kept, and I'm like, oh, you keep posting those. I'm like, man, if there was not a pandemic now, I'd be driving up there. It was fantastic.
Well, and I love cooking over fire. So I would really like to hear what do you guys do for meals? Like, I'm guessing it's pretty simple, pretty quick prep, pretty much not a lot of cleanup. No. Okay, Kevin, go.
No. Well, breakfast is get it done, get out there before the wind picks up. Lunch is never really anything hot unless it's really cold. You have soups, but that you have sandwiches, cheese and hot peppers, whatever. But dinner is a big thing. Okay. And I dehydrate everything if I go on long trips. Like if I only go on a weekend, I'll take fresh stuff. But you got to carry it, right? So, but I'll have a curry, I'll have a stew, I'll have quinoa with pita bread. I'll have a pizza. I'll make fresh bread on day 5 on a reflector oven. Yeah, with rosemary. Like I do not eat crap out there at all. I eat better out there than I do at home.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Scott?
Well, this is, in all honesty, probably an area of opportunity for me, as they say. I'm not much of a cook at home, but I do like to eat, and I'm kind of a meat and potatoes guy, and so that's kind of how my meals lean on a paddle trip. And I guess there's just a huge decision point. Is this a trip where there's portages, where you're carrying the gear, or portage for Kevin, where you're carrying gear a lot, and then it's more dehydrated, it's more instant foods, sometimes freeze-dried food, because you're having to carry a lot, and bulk is a lot. But I have a lot of trips that are river trips, like within the Ozarks or the Wisconsin River, or the Flambeau, or places like that, where we actually bring a lot of fresh food. And so, a lot of my meals kind of tend to run towards meat and potatoes, and I like to try and surprise people with some rich desserts. And I think John was making popcorn last night in the Ozarks, and a reflector oven. That's always I like to try and put a little show into things a little bit too.
Sure.
I wasn't necessarily fancy, but coffee, I always do the spin the pot coffee. My people who've been in my trip, they love it. They want that, and it's part of the routine. And same thing with the reflector oven. As people kind of sit around the fire, it's a little bit of the show. Baking some fresh cookies in the reflector oven. So I like that. But also, I try and be a bit strategic in how I put trips together. So I want my trips to be safe. I want to be adventure, but I want to be fun. So I try and think about the mix. And there's certain people I invite along, and I try and really get to come along because they help make the trip fun. Yeah, John, I think, how many stories did you hear about my brother on the Ozarks trip?
Yeah, I've never met his brother. I want to meet his brother now based on the stories of the two of these guys out tripping together,
Yeah, we're up there for 6 days or something, and stories about Luke, my brother, were nonstop because he makes a trip fun. He's a funny guy. He's an experienced out. He's not as passionate about it as I am, but he's experienced. He's done his whole life. So I'm bringing him along because he makes the trip fun. Mm-hmm. I also try and recruit medical people. I won't lie. I give priority to medical professionals because, I'm a wilderness first responder. And to Kevin's point, I try and refresh. Man, do I deal with a horrible laceration or a break out there? I did a trip a few years ago on the Big Fork River in northern Minnesota, and there was an MD on the trip, a physician's assistant, a paramedic, a firefighter EMT, and another wilderness first responder and myself. I was like the lowest level, and I thought, this is good. This is how I want it. And so I do like that. So people who make it fun, medical people. I guess what I'm getting to is people who can cook. On the same trip, I have a good buddy through scouting, and he's a fantastic cook. And we talked about it ahead of time. I said, hey, Mike, do you want to be my kitchen guy? Like, I'll help you out. I'll buy all the food. Give me the list. And man, he was feeding us Korean barbecue beef or pork out there. He had backcountry chicken gyros, and we were baking stuff. It was just fantastic. So
fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
I gotta ask you guys a question that I've really wanted to ask you guys all night. So I was on a trip on the Des Moines River in Quebec, and I knew some of the people, but I didn't know the two guys. And the two on the trip were first responders. And it was just a recreational trip. We were doing the Des Moines River. It's a technical river. And it was about halfway down the trip. It was a 6-day trip, or day 3 or day 4, whatever. And we're on, I think it's called Canoecopia Rapid. So it was a technical rapid. And so we were portaging around it. And some guys were running it, and you could tell they had no clue what they're doing. And they dumped. And so I looked at the two responders, and all three of you, get this, okay. I said, so we should do something? And both of them said, we're on holiday. I'm not doing anything.
Oh my God.
And I thought they were joking, but they were not joking. So has that ever happened to you where you're like, no, I'm on holiday. I'm not saving you, man, because you're idiots?
I mean, there's like the split second joking about it, but absolutely not. No. No.
No. So, I mean, my level of training is basically like a real advanced first aid. It's a wilderness first responders, like a 7-day program. I do not consider myself a medical professional at all. It was a good training program. I need to refresh it. But like Krista, the things you're talking about, you're going to far more, you're getting a lot more real life experience than I am. And so I do have a fear, because the last part of the class, well, the guy said, yeah, I put the sticker, the Knowles Wilderness Medicine sticker in the back of my vehicle. And I was flagged down by a state trooper. He said, follow me. And he drug him back to a bad car crash. And, well, yes, I'd like to think that I could help and would want to do something. That the whole thought kind of scared me, to be honest with you. Like, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? But my dad was a family doctor, and many times I saw him, out of the clinic helping people with, let's say, fish hooks, broken kneecap, laceration, things like that. Old knee fainting in church. And so I think most medical professionals are, they jump right in there if they see it happen.
Well, I am certainly not a doctor, not even close, but I just feel like once you have the training, just do it. My first car accident I was ever on scene for was I was heading to the bank for the golf course, which is my day job, and making a deposit. And I came around the corner, and there was a car that was flipped over, and the wheels were still spinning, and people were just standing around, like looking in the sky, like we have no idea what to do. So I stopped, and everything ended up fine. They ended up landing a bird about a half a mile away, and it was just a crazy, chaotic moment. But I think once you take the training, and if you're serious about helping people, you just definitely do it, and think about it after. I mean, it was scary and terrifying, and you don't want to see people hurt or in a bad position, but it's very liberating to be able to help.
Yeah, that's great.
Even if you're on holidays.
Even if you're on holiday. I was at my other job. So there we go.
You're like, it's tea time. This is slowing me up here.
Scott, you mentioned the state trooper flagging you down, which is interesting and sort of terrifying all at the same time.
Right.
We did the Wilderness First Responder program that I did out in New Hampshire, or not Maine, excuse me. You are the part of your certification says that it is for a rural or wilderness area with limited transport issues. And so there's a mandate on the program that I took, and I think you have to be 2 hours out from a medical center before you can legally treat someone. Well, that's, for a lot of places that doesn't apply, right? But, you think if you are in the backcountry, if you are on a hiking trail where somebody has to get out and then get, unless they can get a chopper in. But a lot of times even, for example, we talked about these earlier, right? You're still, the thing with these is obviously, and kind of, Kevin, you alluded to that too. Don't get overconfident, because that call goes to a center, which then goes to the first responders, which still have to come out and get you. And
Right.
so, when we were going through the training, we had an outstanding trainer with this. And, we got toward the end of it, and everybody in the class had passed, and we're kind of talking about issues and stuff and sort of the real world stuff, right? And I said, well, okay, what about that? What about that time of hours? And, and he said, sure, it's important, right? Because this is what you are certified to do, is what's on there. If you are driving and somebody has, for example, a flipped over car or whatever, you don't just keep driving by. You help the person. Then you deal with the other issues later. He said, document it well, but help the person, which I think is right. It's the good thing to do. So
yeah, I also I think that's makes perfect sense. I kind of wonder, I might be getting over my head here, but wilderness first responder, I mean, certified with who? I think that's that organization, what they're saying, to best of my knowledge. It doesn't mean anything. It's not with any national EMT registry or medical boards or anything. I think that's their guidelines in terms of kind of medical ethics issue. And then you've got local Good Samaritan laws and whatnot. I should just stop talking because I don't even know. But that was kind of one thing I learned going through that program, is they're saying like, oh, introduce yourself as a wilderness first responder. It's like, I'm not sure what that means necessarily, other than the people in this program. It's not any type of state certification, medical board certification. I don't know.
I guess the flip side of that, the other side of the coin, depending on the program, depending on who you take it from, the way that it's structured with medical staff, I do give it some credence with that for the certification process with some of them, but not all organizations either, right? Because it's not a state mandated certificate. Or
I think it's a program. I'm saying I don't know who's backing you up on that or what that means. Mm-hmm. If that organization is trying to cover their behind, or if that means do they have some liability coverage? They'll step in and protect you if you follow those guidelines, or what does it even mean? Like I say, this is getting way out of my depth in terms of legalese and whatnot. So,
well, when we go on calls through the state and national registry, by law, we are taking notes. So, John, I heard you say you take very detailed notes of the scene. That is exactly what we're doing. How long did it take the ambulance? What were the symptoms? What is the address? Where was the ambulance coming from? Did they decide to come? Was law enforcement there? I mean, the state and the national registry require you to take detailed notes. It's just part of the deal. So the fact that you're doing that, I mean, that right there, I think sets you above just anybody who says, well, I'm certified, And
I think the other thing, what I can say too, I thought was really interesting, like with the group of people in there, it was cool because it was from, people that are just going to work summer camp, right? To people that were going to be backcountry, that were going to be ski patrol, that were going to be doing a lot of other stuff. So it was a really interesting group. We got together to celebrate afterwards. Everyone was all happy, and we're sitting around. And one of the other students said something that I just thought was so cool and so fascinating, and just really was one of the things that I felt afterward. I couldn't agree more with. He said, "Okay, so I got the certification now. Now I've got to earn it." In other words, I keep up, I dig more into it, I read more, like our friend here who reads EMT textbooks, It's like, right. But to make the time to go back through and refresh and stuff. And I like the way that she said that, and it stuck with me too, right? It's like, make the time to stay current with this because you don't know what could happen. So,
and the worst thing ever is saying, I can't help you. I don't know what to do. I mean, that's in an emergency. It is the most helpless feeling. So staying current and earning it it's like walking the walk and talking the talk,
Cool.
I think it's a good way to end it because, my God, John, you've got to go on for like ever and ever. Like Scott, he never shuts up. But But a good way to end it is a good scenario that I had happen and would help you guys, because you would be the responders for this. Was years ago, I was on a trip and I met some really unethical camp people, and they were doing everything wrong, and I didn't like them. Every time I would meet them during the day, you're spray painting your name on a rock where native paintings are. Like, that's wrong. They were doing everything wrong, and it was a very elite group of people from a camp, and I pushed forward to get away from them because I couldn't stand them anymore. And then I met actually a great American camp from Upper New York. They're ahead of me, and we're on this really steep portage. And the kid in front of me, he tripped and fell, and he broke his leg. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And so I went to give first aid, and then the counselors came to give first aid. And we weren't sure what kind of break it was, because I wasn't the expert, but we knew something was bad. Every time we moved him, he was in extreme pain. But if we moved him, he was fine. And I now know what was going on, but I didn't know then. So this was before sat phones and spot devices. But I knew downriver was a fishing lodge that had a radio phone, because I knew the area. So I told the group, I go, well, if you can get a canoe to go around downriver and get to that radio phone, that would be a really good idea. So they did. We camped downriver a bit from them, waiting for it. And these are the days, again, before the spot device, sat phones, whatever, right? God, I'm old. But what happened was, and you guys would love this moment, where the helicopter, it was just getting dusk, the helicopter came over, so obviously they got there and got a signal in, and they came to rescue. And the helicopter kept going upriver, and we're like, no, the kid's here. The kid's right here.
Yeah.
That other unethical camp was upriver, not knowing anything, and they saw the helicopter and they waved at it.
Oh.
So the first responders said, well, that must be the camp in trouble. They lowered down, and to lower down a helicopter in the bush is not easy. I'm not sure if you guys have ever done that, but they had to chainsaw trees down to get that helicopter to go down, right? And found out that nobody was in trouble. They just waved the helicopter. So then they got up again and then said, well, we're not in the right place, went downriver, found out where the kid was, lowered the two first responders down, but it was dark. They took off to get more fuel because the helicopter was running out of fuel. Those first responders found out that it was a broken femur and it was a blood clot, and he was almost dead. Yeah. So that's what was happening. If he moved, it hurt, and if he didn't, he was fine. Like, so that was a broken femur. I didn't know that. But so they called in the military, and the military came and got him. And how they had to get him, and this was actually at 4 a.m. They had to make a raft above the waterfall, put the kid on the raft, and put a cable down, and then raise the kid up. And the kid lived, but it went to court. So my journal was put to court, which is really interesting. I don't know if this happens in the United States, but my journal's still in the court. I can't get it back. Damn it.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
Because they said, well, can we use your journal in the court? Because we're suing this other camp for you don't wave at a helicopter. So they got sued for $37,000. They appealed it, lost. So that camp had to pay $37,000 for waving a helicopter, not needing it. And the kid got a pin in his leg. And in fact, I still keep in touch with him. He's not a kid anymore. But are those things commonplace now that are sort of telling people, well, why even bother? Do you guys get frustrated at your job saying, why do I bother when people are just waving at helicopters when they don't need them?
I mean, it's, you shouldn't be doing that, but at the end of the day, I mean, you're still going to do the right thing. You're still going to, there's always going to be people out there that are like that. And that's just the way it is. And, we go on calls where it's pretty shady and you see a lot of things that you don't want to see. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're helping somebody, and broken femur is a huge deal. It's a bad break. That's the worst. It's like you said, blood clots, bleed to death. can happen fast. And I can't believe, I'm pretty surprised that they actually sued the other people. Did these people, were they even campers? Did they even know what they were doing?
It was a kids camp. And so they sued the kids camp counselor because that camp had got in trouble previously many times for doing the unethical things.
Okay.
So the government said, enough's enough. This is years ago, right? So it may different times now, but they had enough at this camp at that point.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything.
How discouraging was that for you? Were you just like, that's it, I've had it? That's pretty bad.
Well, I was pretty young then. I was just sort of like shocked they took my journal.
Had you written anything embarrassing in there? Like, dear diary, today I fell in love.
I did. I know that journal. There was things I don't want. The journal's a journal. Like, I remember I went to take a canoe course. I was going to go off and do a thing in South Korea. And the government said, okay, well, we'll do that. But you need, for insurance, we need to prove that you've paddled over 10,000 hours of paddling. And I went, well, how would I do that? Well, we need to see all your journals, your personal journals. I went, yeah. So I never went to South Korea. Because I'm not showing you my personal journal. Like, who shows you? Like, good God. Your trip notes, yeah, or my book stuff written, yes.
Right.
Personal journals, Jesus.
So, Krista, I have a question for you that kind of came to mind. Tourniquets is kind of a classic. It improvised tourniquet. We learned this way back in Boy Scouts. Take your neckerchief or take a shirt and tie it on, or not, put a stick there and crank it up and tie it on. And then for a while, I learned, don't do no tourniquets. So it was no tourniquets for a while. And then I think, kind of after, all our wars in the Middle East, Gulf War and all that stuff, tourniquets are back in again. So I started going through, now we're back on the tourniquets. And so when I last did sort of my refresh Wilderness First Responder, we talked about tourniquets, but still kind of improvised tourniquets was what I was talking, how you can take different materials and improvise. But what I hear from people I know, they're kind of more of a military background, more of that sort of tactical survival type background. They are very big into carrying sort of the manufactured pro-type tourniquets, with the bandages that you put on. And I'm just kind of curious how big of a deal. I have not happily had to deal with a wound that terrible that would want to put a tourniquet on. I can imagine you'd want the best device possible, but I just kind of wonder how important that might be or not for the extra bulk and size of that tourniquet versus the likelihood of actually needing it,
Yeah. And that, it's interesting that you bring that up, because that is one of the first things when, I was talking to John about what we were going to talk about today. That is one thing that I personally would have. We have to, for our fire department, you have to go through training. In addition to the training that you received to become an EMR, EMT, you have to do your own protocols through your fire department. You have to do your own training through that for Mayo Clinic ambulance, which is what, is around here for them to be okay with us using it. And our medical director. There's a lot of things that we can do as far as, I was talking to John about shoelaces and belts. If you don't have a belt with you, do you have a tourniquet? I certainly would, especially after hearing about axe safety, honestly, with you guys and what a big deal that is. Mm-hmm. It's just, you're right. People were kind of down on tourniquets for a while because they were so damaging. But my next door neighbor, who happens to be a firefighter, EMT, and a veteran combat medic, and I had a very long chat about tourniquets. He's had 6 tourniquets on a person's leg at one time to control bleeding. The guy made it. There was, obviously, he lost his leg. There was no question that was going to happen, but he kept him alive. So, yeah, right. And they also find during wartime, there's a lot of trauma that happens and a lot of, I don't want to say experimenting, but people learn a lot more and things come out of it. So we are in our department are very happy that we can use tourniquets. And to be honest with you, if you don't have the protocols and I'm just a good citizen and somebody is bleeding out because of, an issue, I'm going to do whatever I can to control that bleeding.
Yeah.
It needs to be 3 inches from the wound, closest to, closer to your heart. Right. You can use a blood pressure cuff if you are out of, sometimes you have to get really creative, but I am, like I said, not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I just respond to emergencies, but I'm grateful that we can use them. And I certainly am pro. The only thing is the training tourniquets that you use, they're strictly for training because once you use a tourniquet, even to practice, it is considered not good. It's not worth using anymore. You want to use one that is right out of the bag, fresh, tight, not stretched out, that type of deal. I'm interested to hear if do you guys carry tourniquets? Is that something, or make sure you have belts, or is that anything that you've considered?
No, I just the next canoe trip, I'm just going to bring you, Krista.
You don't want me, trust me. God.
Yeah. Always carry a thick leather belt for hold my pants up, strap my knife, and there's some thought for emergency purposes, and then other materials like cloth dressings, because that's what I've been taught. And you look back, where did the Boy Scouts learn that in the old days? Well, it's from World War I and earlier type stuff, and that's what they're doing then. I think there's some success, but it sounds like it's probably there's the devices have improved significantly. So I could see I have sort of 2 mega group size expedition type first aid kits, and I'll probably add those in there.
Yeah. I feel like if you're out in the wilderness and it's a question of bleeding to death or losing your arm, I mean, what do? You lose your arm. It's just not a question.
And on that cheery note, we're at an hour and 10 minutes, my friends. So
I was just about to faint.
Yeah, get something to eat quick. But I want to thank you all for agreeing to do this, sort of after hours piece with us. Gentlemen, if we could raise a glass to Krista and to first responders in North America. The work you do is amazing. We appreciate you. Can't say that highly enough. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you very much. And it was so interesting. You guys were great, and I learned a lot. I really did. It was great.
I learned a lot about backdrop.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for tuning in to this. If you want to if you haven't seen the first part of this, go over to Canoecopia and you can get registered there to see that and a lot of other. Kevin, how many presentations are you doing this year at Canoecopia? 5. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So does that include this or 5 solo?
No, 4 and then this.
Yeah. 4 and this one. Okay. So
basically 4.5, really.
4.25
because Scott's involved in this one, so I don't really include it as a full. Yeah. I'm just okay. The one thing that a lot of people are asking this week about the whole virtual presentations and not. In fact, last night I was on a rock station in Chicago about it, and they're saying, "Well, what's it like?" I went, "It's not the same. There's no magic. There's no feeding off the crowd. There's no hugs and kisses and stuff like that. But a lot more people are watching because you can be anywhere in this world and watch this. You don't have to be in that one room, which I enjoy. I enjoy being in that room with the audience. I really do miss that. Really miss seeing everybody like you guys at the show, whatever. But the benefit of it is you're getting people watching this and getting good information. They could be anywhere in the world.
Right. Sulawesi, for example. Our friends in Sulawesi.
Yeah. And they really don't know how tall Scott is. Like, really, you were 8.5? You're a giant.
Close.
Really is a big man.
6'5".
And your brother is
Same.
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I think what we need to do is have a charity throwdown. So Jim Baird is a big guy,
Oh God, yeah.
right? Scott Oeth is a big guy. Why
We've
don't
got pictures of Jim and I at Canoecopia. Yeah.
like a cage match at Canoecopia next year? Scott.
Oh no, Jim would beat the crap out of you, Scott. No.
I'll let Luke handle that one. Yeah.
And what happened?
Kevin. I'll fight Kevin, and I'll let Luke do Jim Baird.
Oh no, I'll lose for sure. I would love to referee that. But when Jim wins, he'll say, "I beat the crap out of you."
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
That's
We need a better American representative. I'm too old for that. Yeah.
But he'll apologize afterwards.
Well, you know, we're all,
afterwards.
we're all Wisconsin, and Scott's in Minnesota now, but he has Wisconsin background. So, you
Yeah.
know, it's that upper Midwestern and Canadian politeness. So, I mean, it would be the most polite cage match you've ever seen in your life.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It was the old boxing marquee at Queensbury or something rules, the sort of polite rule. Yeah.
That's true.
There you go.
Oh my God, I really miss you guys. I got to say I've known a lot of people in the UK, the US, and Canada, whatever, through all these shows. And I'm the old guy that's been doing these shows for years, but I know so many fantastic people in the US that I'm missing this year, and it's hurting big time. And I know they're missing going to the Canadian wilderness, and that's really hurting them. And I'm really hoping things change so that we can get them back and at least teach them how to say portage right.
I'm really sorry for a loop. You know, I've done a lot of trips in Maine. They call them carries out there.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, it's not portage or portage. They carry.
Yeah, and they pull the rabbits and not paddle them. Just messed up.
Yeah.
See, and I've been up to Canada enough now, and I'm starting to get it like twisted up. So I don't say portage or portage. I'll use portage as a noun. So, go over to the portage and portage. I'm all messed up, man.
No,
I'm at the
I
age.
almost feel like that makes sense. That kind of makes sense. Yeah.
It does, but when I'm at the age when I get to something, whether it's a portage or portage, what I say is like, I'm not doing that.
As long as you still measure it in rods, John. That's the key.
Oh God. Yeah.
None of these meters.
Ugh. All right.
Also, no, I'm not going to sleep tonight because I have Krista's background in my head.
I know. I'm so sorry.
Hey, I want to put this up here across the bottom to. We've got some tips and some gear suggestions, particularly on emergency and first aid kits. You go to theoutdoorkind.org and blog. Be sure to check out Scott's bullmoosepatrol.com and kevincallan.com. Both of them have just some outstanding information on their sites. Kevin has a ton of stuff up on YouTube. I don't always recommend YouTube for going into background. Kevin's got great information there and can recommend his stuff wholeheartedly. So thanks to everybody for joining in. We've had a good time. We're over time, and we'll call it good here. So thanks, everybody. And you guys hang on in the green room here, and we'll say goodbye now. Cheers, everyone.
What?